Hello everybody, Coach Larry coming to you live from the pool tonight. Hope everybody had a great week and a great weekend. We are going to be talking about anticipation tonight. Some of you might be old enough to remember Carly Simon, who had a great song from back in the 1970s called Anticipation. In fact, I posted that song this morning as I gave a heads up about the topic for tonight. Great song by Carly Simon, 1970s, Anticipation, and it reminded me of something that I've been working with the swimmers a lot on lately, and that is this whole topic of anticipation. So we're going to dive into that and talk about how important it is, especially at your swim meets, and especially when it comes to the end of season swim meets. Anticipation. Now, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to all the swimmers who did one-to-one sessions this weekend. We had a really productive, excellent weekend. I want to give a shout out to Victoria, who came in a little bit earlier this week, and Lawson, and Smiley, and Amelia, and George, and Neely, and Lucas, and Alex. And then we also had 3 people who are brand new to one-to-one sessions. And so I want to give a special shout out to Sarah, and Coulter, and Layla. All 3 of those guys joined us this week for the first time, and they did awesome. We worked on all sorts of things this week. We worked on starts, turns, underwaters, all 4 strokes. And in fact, we worked on this really important topic of anticipation. And that's what we're going to dive into tonight. In fact, we were supposed to have more people join us this weekend for one-to-one sessions, but there's this really nasty flu bug going around the Charlotte area. So make sure you keep your hands washed, everybody. But yeah, so the flu kind of knocked a couple people out. So, but remember, a couple weeks ago we talked about the importance of jumping hurdles. We were talking about that as a follow-up to our goal-setting discussion. So remember, whenever you get serious about setting goals, you're going to have to jump some hurdles. And here we are in the month of January. One of the big hurdles that you're going to have to jump from time to time is the flu bug or just getting sick. And a lot of times people think, oh man, my season's over. That's it, you know, it's derailed, I'm done. That is not true. Absolutely not true. Yes, we get sick, but the good news is we recover. And when you're sick, just take advantage of the time. Rest. Your body needs rest, so why not give it some extra rest? When you come back, you will be fine. You will be stronger, and you will also appreciate your health more. I know that's what happens to me every time I get sick. I come back and I'm like, man, I am really thankful to be healthy. So jump those hurdles and you'll be good to go. So what's the big deal about anticipation? That's what we want to talk about. Well, anticipation in the sport of swimming is directly related to something that we talked about the very first week of these Facebook Live broadcasts. And that is the topic of turns. Turns make or break your races. Remember, when you watch the Olympics, how much time separates the people who are on the podium to the people who are not on the podium? It's mere hundredths of a second. Hundredths. So we spend all this time swimming back and forth and back and forth. But yet, how much time do we really spend on the turns? The things that make the biggest difference. That's where we need to really focus. Now, the turn, as you may be aware, is composed of 3 parts. It's not just what you do at the wall, but it's 3 parts. Number 1 is the approach, how you approach the wall. Number 2 is what you do at the wall. And number 3 is what you do after you exit the wall. So, the 3 parts of this all-important turn that can make or break your races: number 1, the approach; number 2, at the wall; and number 3, the exit. We're going to talk about number 1, which is the approach. As you're approaching the wall, you have to understand what anticipation is all about. Because remember, here's what's happening. And, okay, I'm just going to take the camera here. We're going to go for a little walk here for just a minute. All right, so here we are. See that right over there? Okay, that is, of course, the wall. And when you're racing, you are heading toward that wall at maximum speed. That wall is made of cement. And if you run into it full force, it's not going to be a good day. It's going to be worse than the flu, probably. Okay? So, let me get this right back on the tripod here. See if we can get that all set just like that. Awesome. All right, so what we want to do is, as we're approaching this big thing at this big wall of cement at full speed, we want to make sure we're thinking about anticipation, okay? Because we can't just swim right into it, okay? We can't just swim right into it. We've got to anticipate it. But a lot of times people think of anticipation as slowing down. And that's kind of our survival mode, our survival instinct is to kind of slow down as we're heading toward this wall of cement. But yet our coaches tell us, what, swimmers? Full speed ahead. Full speed ahead toward cement. Kind of goes against the rational mind, right? But, so what we've got to do, we don't want to slow down, but we want to anticipate. So anticipating is not about slowing down, it's about timing. It's about how do we hit the wall, either with our hands or with our feet, at just the right time. Because if we don't hit it at just the right time, we're going to be in a whole heap of trouble. Because think about this. Those of you who are swimmers, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. If you're not a swimmer, listen up, because this is really big. If you don't hit the wall just right, you either end up eating the wall. We talk about eating the wall, which is no fun. Or we end up gliding into the wall way too long and we slow down. So, if you come into the wall and you take an extra stroke of butterfly, let's say, okay, and you're too close, you end up like the wall is right here, like right in your face. And it's really hard to get off the wall and go in the opposite direction when you eat the wall. We don't want to eat the wall, but we also don't want to glide too long into the wall, because then we lose all sorts of speed and we lose our momentum. So how do we find this right blend of not eating the wall because we're too close to the wall, or not gliding too long? It comes from practicing your anticipation, and that's the big deal. Because remember, anticipating is part of the approach to the turn. The approach is an incredibly important first step to the turn. And the turn is what separates people who get on the podium versus not on the podium. It's what can separate you from making that swim meet, making the cuts to get into a swim meet that you really want to get into, or not making it. Just hundredths of a second can separate you from beating your arch rival or losing to him or her. So this is really important. We got to learn how to anticipate. So a couple years ago, I was at a swim meet in uptown Charlotte, and there was a young man on the team where I was coaching, and he was really, really close to making a junior national cut in the 100 butterfly. Now, his coach, the coach that led his practice group, was so amped up and so excited that this kid was going to make the cut. So he's swimming in the 100 butterfly, short course, right? So there's 3 turns. He hits the first turn in stride, perfect. He doesn't eat the wall, he doesn't glide too long, hits it right on, boom, awesome turn. Second turn, hits it right on. Comes into the third turn, and what happens is he takes an extra stroke and he ends up eating the wall. He ends up about this close to the wall. And so he's got all of this extra momentum and he gets kind of stuck on the wall, has a terrible turn, and he missed the cut by 1/10 of a second. What happened was he didn't anticipate that third turn. You do not want to be in that situation. You do not want to be in that situation, because then you've done all this work all season long, and you've practiced and you've done dry land and you've gone through your strategy and you've talked to your coach, and all of a sudden here, because you didn't work on your anticipation, you blow your final turn and you miss the cut, or you miss beating somebody, or you miss dropping time. So we got to work on anticipation. All right. You might have seen some interviews with Michael Phelps over the years. And it's really interesting because the interviewer, these are really good interviewers, but they usually ask about the swimmer's feelings. You know, the swimmer has just finished swimming a 200 fly, and they feel like they're basically about to throw up. You know, if you've ever swum a 200 fly or a 400 IM before, you know what it's like. You feel like basically you're going to throw up. And you've got the microphone in your face, and the interviewer is saying, what was going through your mind? And how describe how you felt in that last 50 of your 200 butterfly. Now, if you've seen these interviews with Michael Phelps, and what does he always talk about when it comes to a butterfly race? What he almost always talks about is, I just wanted to hit my turns. I wanted to hit my walls. I want to hit my walls. What he's talking about is he wants to anticipate. He doesn't want to glide in too long, and he doesn't want to get too close. He wants to hit it just right. So, take heart, people, swimmers. Even the greatest swimmer on the planet, sometimes he misses his walls. Sometimes he doesn't anticipate. So that means all of us. Nobody's exempt from this. From the very top to the very introductory levels of swimming, you need to work on anticipation. All right, so what can you do to work on your anticipation so that you can nail these turns, so that you can make your cuts, so that you can drop time, so that you can beat your arch rival in that race? Here's what we can do. There are 3 ways that you can work on your anticipation. And I want to compare this to theater. Some of you may be theater buffs. You may have been to the theater before. But I want to compare it to the 3 stages of getting ready for a performance in theater. Number 1, you've got your play practice, that nightly play practice. That's where you're going to memorize your lines, you're going to get ready, you're going to know where to stand, you're going to do all those really fine details. The second thing that you do is you have dress rehearsals. We talked about that last week, and if you missed that talk, make sure you go back and watch that. It's posted to my Facebook account. So you've got the play practice, you've got the dress rehearsal, and then you've got the performance itself. That's number 3. What do you do right before the performance on stage to get ready for the play? Well, we've also got 3 stages getting ready for your final meet of the season. You've got nightly swim practice. That's like your play practice. You've got your dress rehearsals, which are your in-season meets. And then you've got your performance. When the curtain goes up, you've got that final meet of the season. There are things that you can do there to get ready and to prepare to anticipate. Okay? Now you might say, well, look, can't I just eyeball it? You know, I see the wall coming. You know, why can't I just kind of wing it? Well, you can. I mean, you can just wing it. You can just go with the flow. You can just kind of eyeball it. That's fine. But if you're really serious about your swimming, you don't want to wing it. You want to make sure that you put in the work and put in the planning so that you can anticipate these turns as much as possible. Yes, there's always a little bit of room for kind of making adjustments at the last minute. But as close as you can come to anticipating those walls through your practice and your dress rehearsals, that's what you want. All right, so let's spend a few minutes talking about each one of those opportunities. Number 1, nightly swim practices. This is where you can really hone in on anticipating the wall during your turns, okay? Let me use an example. Let's say you're at practice and you're going to dive off the block. What you want to do is you want to dive off the block. You got to know how many kicks, how many dolphin kicks you're going to take, how many strokes you're going to take before you actually reach the other end of the pool. It's not winging it. You want to know, okay, if I take 6 underwater dolphin kicks, then I'm going to come up and I'm going to take 8 strokes. Let's say it's 8. But if you only take 4 kicks, if you only do 4 kicks underwater, well, then you might need to take 9 strokes. Well, which one is right? That's where you need to work with your coach to figure out what's the ideal number of dolphin kicks underwater, and then what's the ideal number of strokes to take during that first length, that first 25 of your swim. Okay? So this can get a little complicated because it also depends on what stroke you're doing. Well, that might be butterfly. But what if you're doing breaststroke? Well, then you got to figure out how long is your pullout, and then how many strokes do I take? Or what if you're doing freestyle? Or what if you're doing backstroke? How many kicks? How many strokes? You got to practice these things. You want to know for certain at those speeds, okay? What stroke? How many strokes am I going to take? How many kicks am I going to take? And you want to know it like the back of your hand. You want to practice it so many times that you can almost do it in your sleep. Because it's not always going to be the same. For example, you might say, okay, in butterfly, I know I'm going to do 8 strokes. Yeah, but what about if you're doing a 200 butterfly versus a 100 butterfly? You're probably going to take more strokes in the 100 butterfly on the first 25 than if you're doing a 200 butterfly, because there's going to be a higher stroke rate, a higher tempo. Okay? So you've got to understand how many strokes you're going to take in each stroke, in the different strokes. You got to know how many kicks you're going to take underwater. And you also want to know, what about when not only when I dive in, but what about off my turns? When I push off my turn, am I going to take the same number of dolphin kicks and the same number of strokes on that next 25 that I took on the first 25? The answer is no. So you've got to know that as well. Okay? This is not for the faint of heart, but it is so important. Okay? So during your nightly swim practices, you want to make sure that you are working with your coach to figure out what's my ideal kick count, what's my ideal stroke count, so that I can hit the wall in full stride. So I don't want to eat the wall. I don't want to get too close to the wall, and I don't want to end up gliding forever and losing all my momentum. So work with your coach at your nightly swim practices to get that anticipation, because that's going to determine how well you do your turns. And how well you do your turns is going to determine how you do against the competition and how you do against the clock. Okay? Very important. Number 2, the second opportunity that you have to work on anticipation is the dress rehearsal. Remember last week, if you didn't see it, definitely tune in, because that's probably the most important message you can ever listen to as a swimmer. The importance of dress rehearsals. But at the dress rehearsal, these are in-season meets. In-season meets is where you get to practice what you preach. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's where you have the pressure of going, swimming against your competition. You get nervous, okay? When you get nervous, it's a little bit different than when you're in practice. So you want to practice at your dress rehearsals, these in-season meets. Most of the time, at your meets during the season, especially if you're 13 years old or older, there's not, most of the time you're not going to get your lifetime best times. But you should try, because sometimes you will. You should always try to get your best times. Every time, every race, every meet. But you need to understand that when you're 13 and over, your coaches are beating you down enough that it's pretty hard to get your best time. But you can work on your skills, just like anticipating the walls. So you're at the dress rehearsal. You're doing the 100 butterfly. You want to know, okay, the pressure's on. I'm going to work my kicks. I'm going to do a certain number of kicks underwater. I'm going to take a certain number of strokes. And if you hit that wall right on, boom, you've got that confidence of knowing that you are heading in the right direction toward your command performance, toward your championship meet at the end of the season. So use those dress rehearsals as opportunities to work on your anticipation. So nightly swim practices, work with your coach, work on your stroke counts, anticipating the wall. At the dress rehearsals, which are your in-season meets, the meets in October, November, January, February, these are meets where you're not rested, you're not ready to race at your top level. So use it as a time to get your skills, and get your anticipation down pat. Okay? Okay. Then the third opportunity that you have is at the performance, at the command performance, at the season-ending championship meet itself. Because that's the place where you're typically going to be at a pool where that's not where you practice every night. So during warm-up, work on your anticipation. Get used to the blocks. Get used to how the wall looks. Get used to the depth of the pool. These are all things that are going to be important for you at that final performance during warm-up to say, okay, here I am. I'm ready to go. But you don't want to just wing it. You don't want to just say, well, whatever happens, happens. During warm-up, you want to get up on the block and you want to go full speed, just like you're going to go for that race that's coming up that day. If it's the 100 fly, okay, do the first 25 of your 100 fly right there during warm-up and see if you hit it. If you end up eating the wall, you got to adjust a little bit. If you end up gliding too long, adjust a little bit. But you've got an opportunity right there at your championship meet to put the icing on the cake. You've been working on it all season at the nightly practices. You've been working on it at your dress rehearsals, which are your in-season meets, and now you're ready to do it during warm-up. So that when you arrive at the block and the curtain goes up and the command performance is here, the performance is here, the big day is here, you can have complete confidence that you are ready to anticipate your turns, that you are ready to hit your turns at full stride, whether it's butterfly or breaststroke or freestyle or backstroke. You're going to hit it. Now some of you, many of you who are swimmers, you say, well, wait a minute, that's not a guarantee, Larry. There's no guarantee that you're going to hit your walls just right. Just ask Michael Phelps, right? I was talking about him earlier. What happens to him often, like he'll say things like, yeah, during prelims, I didn't hit my walls right. I got to hit them right tonight at finals. So a lot of times you're not going to hit them right. But if you practice beforehand at your nightly practices and your dress rehearsals, you're much more likely to hit the walls right in stride. But you also have to have enough finesse, enough awareness, so that if you go, let's just say you go a little too deep on your start, well then you might take a couple extra dolphin kicks to get to the surface. Well, that's going to change your stroke count. Don't panic. As you're approaching the wall, you can still use your finesse. You can still use your athleticism, and you can use your eyeballs to say, okay, it looks like I'm going to be a little bit short here. So I either need to take one extra stroke, or I need to take one big long stroke and really nail it. Okay? You're going to have to make that judgment call. Just like Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger, these guys, or some of the other quarterbacks who you've seen play recently in the playoffs. Sometimes these guys get flushed out of the pocket, right? They want to be in the pocket and nail the receiver just like they practice during their daily practices. But sometimes the linebacker blitzes, and all of a sudden they get flushed out of the pocket, and they have to make adjustments, and they have to look for a different receiver on a different route than they were accustomed to. So you got to be ready to make those adjustments, just like the quarterback, just like people in other sports. Okay, but you want to set yourself up for the most likely scenario, which is you want to hit the wall in stride just like you did in practice, just like you did at your dress rehearsals. And if you're really serious about it, and you know your kick counts, and you know your stroke counts, and you've practiced it with your coach, you should be able to hit those things. Just understand that sometimes things don't always go as planned, and you have to use some finesse at your championship meets in order to make sure that you hit those walls in full stride. So, anticipation, just to summarize, anticipation is all about making sure that this all-important turn goes well. The turns make or break your races, like I said earlier. The difference between you making a cut and not making a cut can be hundredths of a second. The difference between you beating your arch rival, hundredths of a second. The difference between your team beating your arch rival team in a dual meet comes down to hundredths of a second. Making a cut for the Olympic trials, or futures, or nationals, or junior nationals, or senior sectionals, or age group sectionals, or state, doesn't matter. It often comes down to hundredths of a second, and that's your turns. So you gotta take your turns very seriously. And one of the most important parts of your turn is the approach, anticipating the wall. So work on it with your coaches. Get really good at it. Understand what you need to do, and then enjoy that moment when you hit those walls in full stride and nail those turns and achieve those goals. Okay? Work on it, and you'll be glad that you did. Don't wing it, guys. Be serious about preparation. Preparation is the key. All right, so that's it for this week. Remember, anticipate your turns. If you have any questions, you can fire them off after this video is over. You can post your questions either here on Facebook, or you can go to our website, iswim121.com. And at that website, there's a place where you can ask questions. We have these videos posted, and we also have information about how you can do one-to-one sessions or coaching, mentoring sessions, and all sorts of fun stuff. Okay, so hope you guys have a great week. If you've been sick lately because of the flu, don't worry, you'll get better. If you haven't gotten it, keep your hands washed. And just remember, if you have to jump those hurdles, jump them. Don't shy away from hurdles. If you get sick or if you get injured, no matter what, if something happens that you don't like, keep going, okay? Keep going. Watch the last couple of weeks of Facebook Live. You'll learn how to set goals, jump the hurdles, and how to have successful in-season meets. So have a great week. See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.